This is Dmitry Ivanovich with the naked truth. I am now going to call the Clinton County Courthouse because these people, after 12 years, are still trying to deny me due process. I have been appointed my own counsel and representative in a post-conviction relief application because 4 previous post-conviction relief applications were destroyed by prosecutor Mike Wolf, and that is a disbarable offense. So far, in the present form of the proceedings, a shyster named McHugh, who's an assistant county attorney, has provided me with a disc which is supposed to have court records on it. Well, he changed those court records, and I can tell from that disc because it has what they call artifact. You can't change digital information without producing artifact. And now we may hear the clerk of the court just presumably hanging up on me because she's been told to do that, even though I am my own counsel. And you know, lawyers have contact. They need to have contact with the court and with the clerk. I could say that attorneys regularly have intercourse with the court, but that doesn't mean you get fucked. So, here we go. This may be a long one until we get to Eileen, or whoever is going to impersonate the clerk of the court today.
You have reached the offices of Clinton County Government. Regular business hours are Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. If you know your party's extension number, you may dial it at any time. Or if you know the name of the person you want to speak with.
Now watch this, where you go.
Please wait while I transfer your call.
Yeah, you transfer my call, honey.
Clinton County Treasurer's Office?
Yes, could you connect me with the clerk of court, please?
Just a second, please.
Thank you.
Clerk's office, this is Eileen.
Hello, Eileen. This is Jeff Soboroff. I was wondering if you had received the motion that I sent you last week.
Jeff, I don't know because our computers are down right now.
Well,
so I can't.
Well, the thing is, since I have been appointed my own counsel, an attorney, I have to object, and I had to send a letter about how the clerk's office has been just hanging up on me because apparently Mr. Wolf or Mr. McHugh told you to do that. Now,
Well, we've actually been told by the chief judge that we don't need to take your calls any longer.
And that would be Mr. Latham?
No, the chief judge.
Who is that?
That's Judge Greves.
Judge Greves. Well, that's very interesting. You know,
Okay, so
if I am my own
to hang up,
counsel,
sir.
so like you're trying,
Thank you.
Judge Greves is denying me my due process. Judge Greves. Judge Greves was a judge who decided that I needed to be locked up for 8 days. This is an interesting story. In 1982, I went to Beethoven's bar. My hair was black, jet black, and I had a lot more on the top of my head than I have now. I also had a beard that was down to my cock. I looked just like ZZ Top. And I went to a bar named Beethoven's. And Beethoven's was just a rock and roll club. And I went into Beethoven's and I looked in the wrong direction. I looked at the part of the floor where people were dancing. And there were two officers, Laurel Mulvaney and Hal Wilkerson. Laurel Mulvaney and Hal Wilkerson were special guys because for 20 years before I met him, and I met him at the end of a nightstick, they were called Bump and Thump by their pig buddies on the Scott County Police Force. And what they would do is they would get moonlighting jobs at Beethoven's Bar and other places. And what they would do is they would, for absolutely no reason, pick out the longest-haired and shaggiest-looking hippie in the place and beat the fuck out of him with nightsticks. Now, bouncers in every state are only allowed to use their size. They are not allowed to carry weapons of any kind, especially weapons that are deemed deadly force. And when you hit a person on the head with a nightstick, you can kill him, and that's called deadly force. And that is the only reason why I could take them into court for the civil suit, because they were carrying deadly force. And there was another reason I won that. On the 15th of October, the morning after they had desecrated me, they made a report. And the only thing that is on that report of their bouncing activities at Beethoven's Bar was the sentence, "We didn't hit him." The interesting thing about that is that nobody had called the Scott County Police Department yet to complain about being beaten up. So the 15th of October actually was the time that I won that case, but the case didn't go to court until 1987. From the year 1982, October 15th, to 1987, when I received the judgment that was caused by the head injury that I was given, I was put through hell. And I was put through hell because I had become politically inconvenient when those two momsers smacked me in my head. Now, since then, since I recovered, and I did recover, you can recover from a head injury. It's a lot of hard work, especially when no doctor will help you. In 1984-85, the hospital, attempting to deny me medical care, tried to use the power of the law and the court to persuade me that it would be $3,000 cheaper for me if I signed a waiver which would allow them to collect money for a involuntary stay for 8 days in a PCI unit. But involuntary stays are free when the court orders that you be locked up for observation. They can't charge you. So what Vera French and Genesis Health Systems tried to do was they tried to lie to the county. And they told the county that they had delivered $3,000 worth of testing to this individual. Well, I got out of jail the next morning and I was handed my indictment. The first line of the indictment says it came to the attention of the business office. And then it went on to say that I did threaten to launch, shoot, or throw an incendiary device into a public building, namely the hospital. What they were saying was I was trying to blow up people in their sick beds. Now, that never happened. However, on the day in question, I should say the night in question at 2 a.m., when I made that call, I had been given a diagnosis of being totally screwy. And I was told to call the crisis line because I really didn't have an injury. I was more or less a stuffy room and I needed to ventilate. They even said that. Well, the patient needs to ventilate. That day, before I made that call at 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard a new song by Bruce Cockburn called the Rocket Launcher Song. And it was about the death squads in Guatemala. One of the verses starts the song. It goes, here comes the helicopters, the second time today. And and everybody scatters and they hope it goes away. How many kids they've murdered, only God can say. If I had a rocket launcher, I'd make somebody pay. There are a few more verses. They generally end like that. So I get out of the slammer and I'm released on my own fucking recognizance. Now, even if I was the judge, I wouldn't have let myself out of jail if I'm supposed to be nuts and I threatened the hospital with incendiary devices. No, I wouldn't have done it. So I get out of jail and I get handed my indictment and I read this shit and I go, motherfucker, this is about the rocket launcher song. Now, these people in the hospital had been treating me so shitty that very soon after I encountered them, I started to carry a recording device with me every time I went to the hospital for my non-treatment. And I also had a very good cassette recorder connected to the telephone that Julie Malik and I had in our apartment. So I went home and I put on my best bib and tucker, and I took that tape, which was still in the cassette player, and I put it in my suit pocket, and I marched my ass down to the county courthouse in Scott County in Davenport. And I was granted an audience with Margaret Briles, who just so happens to have been the judge who presided at the lawsuit against Laurel Mavenia and Hal Wilkerson and the people who employed them, Beethoven's Bar. And I told Judge Briles that I actually have a recording of the conversation that has led to my incarceration. And I'd like the court to listen to it, because it wasn't a threat. And Margaret Briles says to me, well, Jeff, that's good, but we can't listen to that recording because it hasn't gone through the chain of command. But I knew how the system worked, and I said, yes, but when you call up a crisis line, as a matter of fact, if you call any emergency room in the state of Iowa, there's a 24-hour device, and it records every call word for word. And I told Margaret that I would be happy to sign a waiver, which would be a release of information and would exclude my rights of privacy so that the court could listen to that. And Margaret thought that that was a great idea. So I got a release of information and the proper documents to sign, and within minutes, the law firm of Lane and Evans, the people who represented the hospital in all of their legal things, not in the criminal ones, but they descended upon the Scott County Courthouse, and they were concerned for my welfare and my privacy, and they didn't want the court to listen to that tape. After 8 months worth of hearings, because I was still going to be charged. Nobody was going to clear this up by listening to the evidence that the hospital didn't want to present. After 8 months worth of hearing Doran Shipley, who actually is the only attorney that I've never referred to as a shyster, the only attorney to go balls to the walls for me, and that's because I paid him. When you get a court-appointed attorney, they do not work for you. They work for the state. I don't care what the state says. If the state says that that's not true, that means the state, whatever state you're in, is just full of shit. And Doran Shipley went to work for me, and it cost me $1,000 a month for him to do that. And after 8 months worth of getting bullshit from the hospital, and probably a large degree of bullshit from the court, a hearing was finally held in which 4 doctors had to appear. Dr. Ritmanak, who is the guy who allegedly administered these psychological and neurological tests to me. Keep in mind, no tests were ever administered. And then Dr. Basker, a person who I believe is a Pakistani, and we know all about how Pakistanis feel about Jews. Another doctor, William Nissen, who prescribed a regimen of drugs, 7 psychotropic drugs, because after a couple of weeks on one psychotropic drug, they figured that wasn't working. And they would give me another drug, but they wouldn't take me off the previous one. All of these drugs were counterindicated for use with every other drug on that list. And in addition, Dr. Nissen had prescribed a drug called Fiorinol, which is a barbiturate. The PDR will tell you that you cannot take a barbiturate with a central nervous system drug, which would be a psychotropic drug, because it can just fucking kill you. Well, after taking Fiorinol, along with 7 drugs all contraindicated for each other, and all contraindicated for Fiorinol, I went into a 6-day coma. And the only thing that saved my life is that Julie Malik didn't inform the hospital that I was sleeping for 6 days. She couldn't wake me up. And on the 6th day, on a Friday, I woke up. And Julie told me what was going on. She had used a PDR that is the biggest PDR I ever saw. It had to be over $1,000. And she stole it from the hospital. And she cross-referenced all these drugs. And I'm reading this, and I'm just thinking, what the fuck's going on? These people tried to kill me. So I picked up the PDR, and I got in my car. Mind you, this is like within 30 minutes after I wake up from a coma. I mean, I still got these drugs in me. I shouldn't have drove. I found my way to the triage desk at Genesis West. I gave them back their PDR, and I wanted to know how I could contact Dr. Nissen, who had prescribed this lethal dosage of drugs. And at that time, a smarmy little shit named Jim Weller, a male nurse, and he was accompanied by 2 big guys in white coats. You know, the guys in the cartoons who chase you around with butterfly nets? And he tells me if I don't do what I'm told to do, I will be transferred to a place where my physical and sexual safety cannot be guaranteed. Now, at that time, Miami Vice hadn't even gone into reruns yet. And I've been in entertainment all my life. And I don't like being heckled. So I looked at Mr. Weller and I said, well, Mr. Weller, you've either been watching Miami Vice too much, or maybe that's your fantasy, because we all know about male nurses, don't we? I was grabbed, I was roughed up, and I was given a hypo which contained the 7 contraindicated drugs that I shouldn't have taken in the first place. And that's how the Mercy Hospital Genesis Healthcare System got into the mindset of trying to charge me for shit they never did, trying to charge the county for testing they never did. After 8 months worth of hearings, Judge Werling, who is a hell of a guy because he reads, is listening to all of this testimony, and he already knows what he's going to say and who he's going to say it to. Finally, Dr. Thomas Garside, the third shrink who was appointed to my case after the hospital tried to kill me, gets on the stand and he's blabbing away. And Judge Werling stops him. And he says, Dr. Garside, I'm looking through the defendant's criminal file, and I don't see the sealed court file section which is supposed to contain the tests that the hospital claims to have done. And Thomas Garside, without skipping a beat, says, we lost them. They lost $3,000 worth of testing that they did in a locked psychiatric unit. And the next thing that happened was the case against me was dismissed, and Judge Werling, at court expense, sent me to a psychologist who is not associated with any hospital system in the state of Iowa. And after a year, after talking to Frank Gersh, and after talking to a very good psychiatrist, it was found that I wasn't crazy at all, that the blow to my head resulted in what is called a postparietal seizure. I would have these seizures because the action of waking up would trigger them, and that one seizure a day would spoil my whole day. And the way they found out I was having the seizures was having tested me by a 24-hour EEG. And that showed that seizure, the point of that, happened right at this site where eyewitnesses who testified in court saw the nightstick land on my head and knocked me out. The jury was so offended by how the hospital had treated me from 1982 until 1987 that besides actual damages, I was awarded the better part of $500,000 in punitive damages. And now, as you have heard, they're trying to do the same thing. They are denying me my constitutional guarantee, and a judge, Judge Greves, not Michael Wolff, and not Mr. McHugh, has arranged for this. A judge. That's inexcusable, and I believe it's also disbarable for a judge to tell a person who's a plaintiff, this is a post-conviction relief. I'm not the defendant anymore. I'm the plaintiff. She's telling me, or telling the courthouse staff, that they don't have to talk to me or cooperate in any way with me. Well, we'll get to the bottom of this. I got a redial button. This is Dmitry Ivanovich with the naked truth.